Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sally Peng. I'm from Center Travis Rosenberg Limited, Hong Kong. Thank you, first of all, for coming here today under this raining weather. And it's our pleasure to be here today to share some of our experience that in the last 40 years, our firm has been spending a lot of times in international trade and custom. I think that on behalf of everyone and also some of our clients, that we really appreciate that Hong Kong TDC over the years, the support as well as the knowledge base for the trade community in Hong Kong. It's very fortunate when I say this because we go to a lot of different countries. Not all the traders in different countries will have this type of a database and support. So that's something that we really appreciated. What I want to talk about today is a topic that everybody talk about on every single day, U.S.-China trade. There's many, many things that are uncertain and as well as the complexity of the trade. So I'm happy if you have any questions that, or if you want to like Louis just alluded to, write it down. I'm happy to talk to you either before or after the presentation. And because the complexity, I'm going to try to keep it a little bit as simple as I can because I want to focus a little bit more on doing this uncertainty. Is there anything really for our trader can do just to help ourselves in this complexity of the trade war? We put together a timeline, and we have a website, and also that I know TDC is going to have one soon as well for the traders. And this is just to kind of, I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just going to show you some of the things that probably not being talked about too much during this entire event. It does started in March 1st. From the U.S. side, when it comes to 232, which I will talk a little bit more in detail as in why we started with the steel and why does U.S. government start with 232. And then I think in March 23rd, maybe some of the people don't notice that it does go into effect, particularly on the steel product on China. So a lot of people will ask me that, oh, it hasn't gone into effect yet. It's actually not true. On March 23rd, the steels as well as aluminums that coming from China, as well as all the other countries, if you don't get exemption, that already suffer the duty increase. I wanted to probably point it out that if you look at the bottom part of it, that's the reaction from China. As everyone know, probably even better than I do, that China, whenever there's a public policy, it's very efficient. Maybe announced in the morning and was able to do it the next day, which is the case here. On March 23rd, China actually already proposed a 3 billion of retaliation tariff, and it go into effect on April 2nd. So the time in between the announcement as well as effective date, especially on the China side, is very swift. Where on the U.S. side, it always take a period of public commenting as well as hearings. There's a lot of a process for U.S. government to be able to implement any new measure. So there's a difference between how we, as a trader, we perceive with the U.S. side as Chinese side. So on the China side, it's always very fast. On the U.S. side, it takes some time. So it gives us a little bit room to work with, particularly on the U.S. proposed measure. If I go to some of the measures on May 19th, as many of you remember and watch the news, that there was a trade delegation led by the Secretary of Treasury of U.S. in Beijing. There was a 2 days, 48 hours of a trade delegation. It does sound like they have reached some kind of agreement, and then the trade war was being avoided. But that was not the case. In fact, during that negotiation, there's still a lot of details that are not being worked out. That related to, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, related to political issues. I want to focus more on the economic side. So the political issue that overshadowed the entire delegation. So at the end, the deals that reach, if there was a deal reached on May 19, didn't go through. There was still on the June 4th, Secretary, U.S. Commerce Secretary, DOC, Department of Commerce, still concluded that there's going to be a trade tariff, particularly on the list one. On the June 15 is the one that U.S. announced the two lists that was subject to the 25% of the duty under 301, in addition to the original duty that you will have to pay. And this also going to effect on July 6th. Okay, so that's the first list one going to in fact on July 6th, which I'll go into a little bit detail in the later slides. I just want to go through this timeline a little bit. And on the China side, also on July list, on the July 6th, there was a list one of the products that also going to effect, and also 25%. So on the 232, well, we talk about, as a trade attorney, we talk about 232s, 301s quite often, but oftentimes I'm being asked, what is a 232 and what is a 301? So on 232, I don't know if everybody knows this. The 232 is a Section 232, a small language that under the Trade Expansion Act. And under this Trade Expansion Act, it says that if the Secretary of Commerce, DOC, if they think that there was certain products that go into the United States that already pose a threat to national security, then the Secretary has the right to start an investigation. So 232, maybe in a lot of people's mind, just type of a tariff, but in our world, it's very serious. It's a big deal. When it comes to national security, you need to have a justification for it. So the statute gives 270 days for the government to gather information. And another sort of side note that company can file 232. Government can also self-initiate 232 as well. In this case, it's the government that self-initiated. As most of you may already know, the current U.S. Secretary of Commerce actually came from steel industry. So it doesn't surprise us much that steel become the first product is being used for this vehicle. So after, the law also says that after the DOC determine there is a threat using the data they collect, the only thing next that will happen is if the president concur, meaning that if president agree that this particular product does pose a national security threats to the U.S., he is allowed, the president under this law is given authority to increase the tariff and or quota. And it's one of those things I think most of the Hong Kong people are very familiar with. It's a product in the past, let's put it this way. We don't see quota that much anymore, but it's coming back. So under this Trade Expansion Act, that president is allowed to increase the tariff as well as the quota to the countries that they think is necessary. So what's missing here, if you can kind of imagine, is the congressional approval. You don't need congressional approval to have 232. So that's why currently a lot of congressmen as well as senators is asking the question, is the president abusing the power? And then they're trying to look into the language to see if there's anything such that this need to be worked with Congress as well. If I look the law, which I'm not going to spend too much time on it, is that it doesn't really specifically say it that you need the Congress approval. And in the past, when 232 had been used before, president at that time did work with Congress to trying to get their support. This time we don't see that. We probably won't see it. It's really a one-man show, or you can call this a White House show. So 232 really is only to two major parties, the Department of Commerce as well as the president. And they are currently, at least for now, the conclusions, they're well within their authority to do that. So as of June 1st, 2018, 232 is going to affect on all countries on steel, unless you get the waiver or quota. There are 4 countries here I listed out. Argentina, Brazil, South Korea actually has a quota against imposed. Australia received a full exemption. And here's the interesting part. When this 232 is being announced, that White House as well as DOC has a press release said that we welcome governments come and talk to us, but one by one. Okay, so this shows that if anybody will still remember the TPP day, which I spent a lot of times on TPP. TPP is a regional agreement. There's 12 countries that are negotiating. But this White House, as well as this administration, they firmly believe that US interests will be best served if it's a bilateral agreement. So they ask countries, say, come and talk to us if you want to get exemption. And Korea is one of the first few countries basically said, yes, we will talk, and then we will self-impose quota. So this actually reinforced the government's, as well as this administration's belief that they get the best deal, which is what the president often said. He get the best deal out of bilateral agreement. So we were using the same logic you will see in the later part of the negotiation, either with one government or different industry. That seemed to be the model as well as the belief of the current administration. On the 232 aluminum tariff, the same idea apply as well. It's also being determined that the U.S. Aluminum product is being attacked, and then it's rise to a level of national security. So therefore, DOC, Department of Commerce, as well as White House, are come together. They also impose a 10% of duty on all countries' aluminum imports into U.S. unless you receive a waiver. In this case, Argentina received a quota, imposed a quota, and Australia again get the full right. So if I focus on U.S., China, then in these 2 products, aluminum as well as steel, China origin goods are all have 25% increase or 10% increase. This is very interesting, and I like to maybe even probably ask more audience opinions, that 232 is also being used, will be used on auto and automotive parts. This is actually quite big deal to us when we see the news. But it doesn't seem to get a lot of attention or a lot of media coverage. We're always questioning about why. Is it because in the midst of all these trade announcements that people don't pay too big of attention to it? Or this is really something that people think that there's not much they can do? But right now, this is 25, if it passed, it would be 25% on all the automobile auto itself as well as auto parts. It's a big industry, and it will impact a lot of business, as well as even the small SME as well, if you're in the business of auto parts. And then this is probably one area will affect us in Hong Kong, particularly our industry. This has not been implemented, but if history can teach us anything, I get calls asked us like, Sally, what do you think? When do you think that this auto parts will be announced? Again, like I said, Secretary has 270 days to conclude the investigation, but right now the process, the case process is actually tomorrow. There will be a hearing in Washington D.C. specific for this case. So I was being asked, when do you think this will be in effect? Our answer, as in most of the answers, it would depending on the political effect, so the factors. So most likely, if as some of you know, that U.S. is about to have the midterm election, so this auto and automobile parts really speak to president's election base in the Midwest. So one of the predictions that quite have been taken a mainstream is that we may not need to wait 270 days. That if the election is tight or it's close or tipped for some other party's favor, we may see this. We may see 232 on auto and automobile parts a lot sooner than we expected. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Automobile basically speaks, if you look at the landscape of cars, this is really going to affect Japan as well as German, which also, not coincidentally, probably by design, has a lot of political issue around it when it comes to their relationship with US as well. It may not affect China as much, but on auto parts, though, we did a research on it. There's a lot of auto parts still coming from China. And then in the past, auto part doesn't really have a high duty rate. So most of the traders, they don't really quite look into which classification, which duty rate that it should be applied. But this is probably a time to look into more carefully on the classification part of your product. All the 232 that I just mentioned is against all countries. There's no discrimination. But 301 is the one that just for China, no one else. It's against China origin goods. When I say China origin goods, it means the country of origin is China. We actually, even though we know the answer, but we would like to get a confirmation, just get more confidence. So we make sure that it does not include Hong Kong origin goods. It also does not include, of course, Macau origin goods. It's the country of origin has to be China. It doesn't mean that the export out of China will be automatically country of origin. So this is something that we can probably discuss a little bit more later as well. So on 301, like I said, what is the 301? The full name of this entire action is, I write it down, it's a 301 action against China Act's policy and practice related to technology transfer, IP rights, innovation. US government concluded that all the things I just said, a very long sentence, are unreasonable and discriminating. So this concluded that it's not fair. Therefore, again, the president has the power to impose tariff. So this part is the same concept following 232. Only one branch of the government was able to make the decision. So on this part, we know that it covered a lot more products than just steel and aluminum. And a lot of things goes to list 1 and list 2, probably everybody quite familiar with. On list 1 is a lot of machineries, a lot of apparatus is what we call part of the machineries. And then we list out a few, but there's 818 tariff lines. And there's some electronical too. And also in this one, it's already in the tariff already in effect, 25% on July 6th. But list 2, though, like I said, it has still in a commenting period. So the hearing of the list 2, it's on July 24th. So if we look at list 1 and list 2, you will see some of the rubber, some of the steels, bridge, and some agricultural product. It's more focused on a lot of products coming from China going to US. Initially has a very low duty rate. So these are probably enjoy a very small duty rate, but now it's going to suffer 25%. So it's a huge impact to many of the traders that if you happen to be on the list. There's another, how long, this is a question I also get asked quite often. Does this 301 has any statutory time limit? There is, it's 4 years, so it's too long. It could be another president, could be the same president. And then during the same once imposed, can it be changed? The answer is yes. According to law, the president can change, and that's why we were going to talk about how would you be able to get yourself out of this 301 tariff. And this is just in, basically, on July 10th, U.S. Trade Representative proposed another $200 billion. This time, the goods will include a lot of different things, but it's only have 10% of tariff. And for the probably first time touch upon a lot of consumer goods, versus before, a lot of things are 25% on material, but now this 10%, it's on the consumer goods. We list out only a few as well: the seafood, the fruits and vegetables, and also all the handbags and travel goods. If you're producing these in China and then going forward, if it goes to, in fact, which it hasn't now, then you will suffer. You will have to pay. Your importer in the U.S. will have to pay 25%. So I thought this might be a good time to look what's on the list, what's not on the list, because one of the key questions that people keep asking is, what's next? We know all these things are going on, all these things are happening, and we probably get hurt, we probably don't get hurt. But what's coming up? This is something that we do need to know. So if I look at what's on the list, from the U.S. side, from the U.S. punished Chinese origin goods side, it's a lot of machinery, I think it's CPU as well, and some of the chemicals. And on China side, it's all about agriculture. The one that China punished, the U.S. origin goods, it's on agriculture, and then on chemical product that's related to semiconductor. The things that are not on though, which is what we focus our research on, and if I list them by volumes, the top 5 items that's not yet on any of the list, and it means that it may be on the future list if this trade war doesn't stop or escalate it. By volume, number 1 coming from China to US will be cell phone and PCs, routers, interesting children's toys, we're talking about that, and then also the computer parts. So these 5 products has not been on any of the list, but these still have over, I don't have exact data, but a very high volume coming out of China to the United States. The ones not on the China punishment list of the US origin goods are the aircraft parts, as well as the conductor-related product. So these is what we call that they reserve it for the future action if the trade war continue to escalate it. Another thing is that many of the people right now focus really on tariff, and we understand that. In fact, for the last 10 plus years, I've been telling people what I do, my family, they don't seem to care and nor interest. But for the last couple months, everybody quite interested in what I do. Like, oh, you do the tariff. So yes, tariff is a big deal, but it's one of those things that maybe when you pay the tariff, you will be able to get your product. But we want to focus a little bit or get your attention on some of the other measures that China and US can do to even further disrupt our supply chain. One thing I kind of talked to a few people before the event started is that export control. I know that a lot of people here, particularly in Hong Kong, high volume, high percentage of exports actually electronic product, either go to China or transship through China or different countries, then to US or vice versa from US to Asia. Hong Kong being such an important and also very flexible transition port, there's a lot of goods coming here. One of our major practice really is export control. So not a lot of people notice this, is that a few months ago, China also released their draft export control law. For most of you may not know export control, at least in my universe, I see export control law as two separate universes. One is the good ones, like European one, they're very open. The other one's the US one, very, very strict. So US one has one particular trade that we were talking about it just before. If, let's say Tiffany and I, we live in China all our life, never go to US for one day, but we happen to transfer one of the product that has US control origin goods, we're violating US law, even though we're in China. They can actually hurt, we're in violation of the law. The interesting, if you look at the draft export control from China, same idea. You could be living in San Francisco all your life, but if you transfer product that has China control goods, you're in violation of China law. So we think that this will be a very strong weapon if China's intention is trying to really escalate the trade war, this actually will be a very powerful weapon. Imagine many of you have experienced trying to get licensing from any kind of government entity from China. It takes some time. And then a lot of goods you can't afford to have those times. So export control is not something that you can pay tariff on. You won't be able to move the goods, period. So that's will be a big disruption of a supply chain. The other things that is more on the investment side. So there's a committee called Committee of Foreign Investment in the U.S., CFIUS. Many of my colleagues work on the CFIUS before. It's a committee that is going to oversee all the foreign investment, whether that will be affecting not just national interests and also industry as well, future prospect of industry as well. U.S. president at one point wanted to impose certain investment restriction just for China, and he decided to back down because this particular aspect now is being picked up by Congress. So Congress is going to expand the authority of CFIUS. That means that they're going to screen more closely on the investment coming from not just China, this time against the world, but could be possibly more focused on China. So this type of non-tariff measure is what we probably it poses bigger threat than the tariff. So what we wanted to also talk about, since now there's a tariff trade war, is there anything as a SME company or as a trader that we can do in order to perhaps save some of the landed cost? One of the things we post 4 things here. We're going to talk about maybe a few examples on each ones, and then every company is different. Your supply chain is different. Your product is different. How you assemble your product is different. Some of them probably even outside of China as well. So, as sort of a general rules. What I what I can do is I have a few observations. I work closely with a lot of U.S. company, European company, and Chinese company, Hong Kong company. I feel that Hong Kong company as well as Chinese company are very brave. Oftentimes we see there's opportunity, we go for it. Whether it will be successful, that's a different story, but we must jump on the opportunity. Very brave. That's why if you go to Africa, you see Chinese company and Hong Kong company as well. For US company, they also jump on opportunity, but they usually have a small period called feasibility study. They wanted to study a little bit, on the return on investment, just a little bit more careful, just a little bit more conservative. If they have an internal team to do that, if they don't, they have external resource to that. I also noticed that U.S. company, they like to form an alliance, but I feel like we have a bravery like running in our string. Like our company usually just go alone, which is we just go to Africa tomorrow and then we just set up a factory. Where if you look at some of the U.S. company, they just like to take everybody together as a team. So it's one of the things I noticed. But in this time of the trade conflict, it is really a good idea to form an alliance. And which I believe that's what China is doing as well. So because the trade tariff, even its focus or the center part will be between China and US. But as most of you know, it's already spread. It's global. It's go beyond just these 2 countries. It's disrupt everything that we do on a daily basis. So it's just one of my observation. And in applying or in related to this 4 possible strategy we want to talk about is that just don't do it just because we say so. Think about it and take some time to do a feasibility study to see if you can do so. And in fact, there's many things that you could do to make sure that you're well within the rules. You can get rulings. You can get rulings from government, from U.S. government, U.S. custom before you jump on it. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out first. Exclusion is it's the first things that I want to talk about. In 232, as well as in the future, in the 301 later, government all provide a remedy. It's called exclusion. It means that you, as a company, if you're being affected by the tariff increase by U.S. government, you're actually allowed to apply an exclusion saying that, excuse me, I don't think my product is affecting your national security. You don't even produce in the U.S. So using that example, you could apply for exclusion. And it's company specific, meaning that if a company A apply for it, only company A gets that benefit. Company B even produce the same product, but if you don't apply, you lose. You don't get it. So, and it's supposedly good for 1 year. 1 year, okay. But here comes the question news. The exclusion, though, the batting average is quite low. After 232 exclusion is being announced, as you can imagine, many people apply. There's actually about over 20,000 pieces, 20,000 applications is being filed with the DOC. And the result just came back, the first batch of the result, only 42 exclusions being granted to 7 companies. Very low successful rate. And 56 is being denied. And these, before you decided to go for exclusion, you also need to think about the low batting average. 301, the same thing. You're actually, if you're being affected by 301, yes, you could apply for exclusion. There's 90-day period. It doesn't. The deadline is October 9th. So if you're thinking about doing it and have a confidence doing it, then feel free to do so. And then it goes, if it's successful, it actually goes retroactively to July 6th. Okay, and some of the consideration about 301 is that you also need to be able to comment that you don't hurt U.S. interests, and plus it doesn't relate it to one of the China's future growth. So since you all have presentations, so I'm not going to go into the detail. If exclusion is not something that you prefer to do because the low batting average, the second possible strategy we want to talk about is called tariff engineering. The tariff engineering, it sounds fancy, but it just means going back to the basic. Since now all the tariff is on a specific line, meaning that for us, even if you're steel, but if your product is not within this tariff line, you're okay. Just because you do steel doesn't mean you're automatically subject to the tariff. You'll be fine. You just have to look at your product to see if they are truly subject to the tariff. So when time of crisis, always going back to the basics. Let's look at your product to see if it really is in the scope of tariff. If it's not, then congratulations. But if it is, then there's possible things you could do is without too much effort, and I stress, this is the part that you really need to do some study on. If your product will be able to have certain manipulation, small manipulation, therefore you're not in that tariff line anymore, then you're out of this scope of punishment. So one example I will give you is, it's a very old history. This is completely legal in the eye of the United States. Is that back in the days that all the sugars actually being, the duty rate of the sugar is based on color. So if it's white sugar, the duty rate is highest. If the darker it gets, the duty rate is lowest. Yes, that was a long time ago. So there was this company that said, okay, I want a lower duty rate. So I'm gonna add some additive into the sugars, make it darker. Therefore, the duty rate is lower. And then the government said, the U.S. Customs said that's not okay. You're trying to cheat. But the core of international trade, it's completely okay because the product that being darkened, also sell as a part of a commercial product. You didn't take the additive out. So that's a legal way to do the tariff engineering. The ones not legal is that if you just tear things apart and then pass the border, then trying to assemble, then that is not okay. So that's on the tariff engineering side. If a small change doesn't really give you any benefit, it's still not giving you any benefit, then the next slightly more drastic option is to have the operational engineering. This is what most of us actually quite familiar. If the product in China is getting too expensive, then you move to perhaps different South Asia country. Again, when you do this, you could actually get an insurance, meaning that you can get US Customs to issue you a ruling to tell you if that's okay. So for example, treadmill, there are a couple examples that I just looked it up yesterday. There's a treadmill company that was like, okay, I wanted to move from China to be assembled to US. And they tell US Customs, this is what I do. Can you tell me if that changed the country of origin? And then they also, in the same request, they ask, if I move all the things to Taiwan, can you tell me if that's okay? So US government actually issued a ruling telling this company, yes, if you do this and that, then your product is considered US made. Your product is considered Taiwan made. And this is the best insurance that you can get. Before you just move everything to US, before you move everything to different country. Think about the things that you could do in order to protect your interest. So these type of maneuver or engineering is something that we see a lot of company might be doing. The last thing, though, I would like to, it's very near and dear to us because we basically invent the first sale rules. It will help you solve some of the landed cost duty, and it's been used by many traders, Hong Kong or China. And I would like to have perhaps my senior manager, Tiffany, to share with us.